All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to my presentation on product growth and monetization. Let's go ahead and go over a brief overview of the things I'll be talking to you about today. Uh, the overview is product first, then we'll discuss a bunch of topics related to product, a bunch of topics related to monetization, and then growth. And the purpose of this presentation is to give you the key building blocks of building a great product and a great company. So, who am I to even be talking to you all? I'm the vice president of BI at ZBD. I've been at ZBD for about 4 years, and then ZBD's been around for about 5 years now. It's a Lightning Network fintech and gaming company. I'm also the founder of Emeralize, which was Lightning Network educational marketplace. I grew it to about 80,000 transactions and then about 3.5K users before I stopped focusing on it. And then overall, I have about 15 years of experience in fintech and banking. Pretty passionate about hackathons too, so I'm really excited about Top Builder and like the quality of projects that you guys are building, and how quickly you guys are building all of these things. It's not easy. One, to build a product, and then two, build a great business behind it. So super excited for what you guys are doing here. Been chatting with Car a bunch about it nearly every week. So yeah, let's get started on product first. And good companies manage engineering, great companies manage product. And what is product all about? Well, it's about solving a problem. You find the core problem through user research and data, identify the biggest pain points that will drive meaningful impact when excuse me, when solved. You build in iterative solutions starting small, and you must have at least one unique selling point that makes your product differentiated. And no matter how good the team, if you're not solving the right problem, the project fails. So this is where user research comes in. So in terms of user research, there's two ways you can kind of approach this. There's probably more as well, but these are the some of the two most effective ways to get started early on. You'll want to conduct one-on-one interviews where you observe user interactions with your product or your product vision. So one, this could be, you sketch something out, and we'll talk about prototyping later on in the presentation. This could be your vision statement and kind of the overall idea of your product and the verticals that you'll have within your product or application. And within those user interviews, your goal is to understand the biggest pain points that the user experiences when working with your product or when dealing with a particular problem. You'll want to tell the person that you're interviewing like what your objective is, uh, such as completing a purchase. So you'll want to watch them from start to finish with your application, complete a purchase, and see whether or not they're able to do it. You will not want to lead them or tell them what to do exactly to accomplish that objective. The goal is to see, like, from start to finish, someone that doesn't know you, um, product before, how they interact and engage with it. That way you can look for product improvements. You'll want to measure the completions versus non-completes and the total time taken to be able to achieve that objective. And you'll want to ask for long form feedback at the end and comments about the usage of your product. So maybe have like a form or something they can submit at the end. And encourage complete honesty. Sometimes people won't want to hurt your feelings. That they think, if they tell you the honest truth, that you're going to get upset with them. So just make sure they know, like, hey, this is for the betterment of my product, my company. Just be completely honest with me. Tell me all the things you don't like. Start with that first. And that will really help you look for the biggest opportunities for feedback and improvement. And then another really good route is surveys. So with surveys, you could, if you have a Figma prototype or a prototype someone can interact with that's a design or an implemented product, you can always share your prototype with them and then create, non-bias survey questionnaire of like 5 questions, maybe 3 to 5, with 5 being the maximum because, people's time very valuable, and the longer the questions, and more, long form questions that you have, the more unlikely it is going to be that someone's not going to complete the survey and you're not going to be able to get the insights that you need. But you'll want to send this to, a much more targeted and broad group of people rather than just one-on-one interviews. And for both of these sort of things, people's time valuable. So if you can provide them with like a gift card, like a $25 Amazon gift card or something, that will also help you get more people to be able to interview, and more likely that they're going to give you the information that you need and to complete it. So that's another important aspect of these user research pieces. And then winning products come from a deep understanding of the user's needs combined with equally deep understanding of what's just now possible. I really like that quote. And like, how do you get to that point? Well, through user research and then also, competitor analysis and your own unique understanding. We focus on like Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, for example. So understanding like what new things are achievable and where market needs are currently not being met. So that's like one, understanding your users, and then two, understanding the competition. First off, like who is your competition should be, a fundamental question that you have. And don't say no one, especially because you might end up competing in a market that doesn't exist yet, which is bad for making money if you're trying to monetize. Which the earlier that you monetize now, I think the better, and like kind of building that into your product from the get go rather than trying to figure it out later. Another thing you can do is SWOT analysis. So understanding, where does your product idea win? How does your product pale in comparison? And where are the existing opportunities or pain points that remain unsolved? And SWOT stands for strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis. So definitely recommend taking the time to do that and understand that and which market you're competing in. Lastly, what is the user experience and journey like with your competitors' products? So, like from the moment that you interact with the product, the moment you install their app or you go to their website, what are the UIs that you see? What's the copy? What are the steps? The login flow? Do they use a phone number login with the code texted to you? Do they require email and password? Those are all things you can make assessments on, like how to make it easier and faster for your users and a better experience overall. And then another essential portion of strategy is choosing what not to do. So then if your competitors, for example, invest heavily in one aspect of their product, but don't in another, you can choose not to compete with them in the same category, and save your time there because it's going to be very hard to beat them in that regard. So next, we'll discuss roadmap. Sequence your execution of new features by, a period of time, such as a month or quarters or even weeks, depending upon, who you're talking to, based on user research, competitive analysis, past experience, and data. So this might be kind of like a very broad, rough roadmap of like, all right, usually like the first year and two is just spent on product development, right, and research, R&D, if you will. So what does that look like in terms of your roadmap? Well, you're going to do user research. You're going to do competitive analysis from your past experience, your own unique understanding, user research, and competitive analysis. You're going to, write some specifications, and then you're going to build a prototype. This can be a design that you can whip up quickly and get more feedback. It doesn't have to be so linear. You should bring back each new development and each change back to some people and get their feedback. And then from there, you might want to spend engineering time now in terms of building out like a beta and then opening up to a wider group of people. You can always start with a closed like beta or closed alpha, and then from there, open it up more widely. If you do a closed beta, you could do things like a referral program to get people sharing it, get people sharing your app and kind of have it exclusive to start, and then you can open it up from there. But you may not like want to go to market yet. And this is where like the MVP development comes in. From the beta, from the user research, from the competitive analysis, the more time that you've had, you're going to build, an MVP. A prototype and like a beta implementation will probably only have like one to two like features built on top of like account management system, for example. Whereas MVP, you may have like three, four, five, or maybe you refine those two like core features that you have and make it the best experience possible, solving all the bugs before you go to market and you actually launch. And then from there, you'll have iterations, you'll have new features, you'll have bug fixes. So you can kind of think of your roadmap in this way. And obviously, like instead of that Q4 block, you'd make it more specific in terms of like what things you're going to build, what are you going to improve. And that leads us next to kind of user journey and user funnels. So you can think of this as like tracking and optimizing each step in your user's journey and measuring key conversion points from the initial acquisition of that customer. So like where that user is coming from, how they signed up to your app, and we'll talk more about those sources later, all the way through activation, engagement to keep them like extracting value from your application, so you and your customer are winning, and that ultimately leads to stronger retention. So the way you can do this is you can look at like each stage. So if people in the sign up process are dropping off on your first UI, maybe there's something like a bug or something that exists on that first, and maybe you're losing like 80% of your customers there. Maybe it's the copy, maybe people don't understand where to click next. Maybe it's through some survey questionnaire or something after they sign up, they just abandon your application. Maybe you delete that. Maybe it will help users, get to the end goal that they have, which is maybe like completing a transaction or solving maybe yeah, being able to tip someone on like a piece of content or something to that effect. So if you're kind of hindering the steps or making it more friction rich to be able to get to that final step, it may be better to do away with it. But you'll want to like be able to track that and understand that to be able to optimize your funnel and make sure people are able to actualize the value in your product first. And then thinking about, brand awareness. This could be seeing a social media post to signing up to learning about your product to making a sale. So ensure that you have simple and minimal friction product funnels. And then some of the most important funnels are onboarding experiences. So this is like, sign in and like an onboarding tutorial or like a few UI screens after they have registered an account that explain your product and what your product does for them, how to use it, for example. So those are some things to think about. And some things that I highlighted here was like OAuth 2, Google plus Apple. Nearly everybody has those two accounts. So being able to have those OAuth 2 where you can sign in with Google or Apple is really nice and like great for conversion. And then magic links too, where you can enter your email or phone number. You get a link or you get like a letter or 6-digit code that you can enter to be able to sign into your account. That's also really nice from like a product standpoint to make it easy to interact and to log in or to sign up with your application. And it makes it so like users don't even need to deal with passwords anymore either, which there's a lot of problems that can happen with that. Users forget their passwords, they forget the emails they sign up with. So those are some things you can like do to future proof your product and make it a better experience. Kind of touched on this already with account management and then the aha moment. So this is like the path the user follows or takes in order to be able to extract value from your product. So for example, earlier, like being able to post a piece of content and be able to earn money from it, or to be able to send another user a tip, for example, a creator that they like, that could be another example. And then here I just included for your guys' reference, like the marketing funnel, and you guys can read this, but you can see over time that it's very natural to have drop off, in each step of the funnel, that you'll have less and less people. And analyzing this like percentage base is good. So you have 100%, maybe let's see, or have 100% of impressions, maybe only 80% of impressions make it to a click, maybe like 60% of that install, for example, and then complete the rest of the flow. So analyze your funnel and define your funnel and think about, how you can continue to improve it over time. Very essential to product marketing, I would say. And then from there, while you're doing all these things, I think it's really important that you build in public and you share your idea as early on as possible. And you can talk about it publicly by sharing the vision on your personal account if you're pre-prototype phase, if you're post-prototype phase, if you're in beta or you're even launched. You can share new versions and releases on your brand account and repost them from your personal account. And the goal really is to grow your following and brand awareness. Like people love to see people build. They want to cheer you on. They want to help you a lot of the time. So I would say, there's a few times where there's people that reached out to me personally when I was building Emeralize, and they were like helping me QA the product, providing me feedback. Yeah, letting me know weaknesses in my application so I could fix them as fast as possible. And I was honestly overwhelmed by like how helpful people really are and how much they want you to succeed. And some of you might be saying, but my precious idea, I don't want to talk about my idea yet because someone's going to steal my idea. But, ideas are a dime a dozen and it's the execution that counts. Like, think about all the effort that goes into building a product from all the research analysis, your own experience, like your own vision for the product. You can't just copy that. Think about Satoshi. Satoshi, on Halloween, sent out an email talking about basically sending out the white paper, talking about what Bitcoin is, how it works, all the math, etc., and then releases it, January 3rd. 3 months, no one, took his white paper and built Bitcoin, during that time. So I think thinking more of a mindset of like Satoshi and being like open with your ideas. Maybe you don't have to necessarily open source your code, but for example, like talking about your product vision, what it is, why you're doing it, how it works, what your background is, those will all be really important to be able to like get initial users and initial feedback outside of your own circle. So I would highly encourage you to think in that mindset and think Satoshi. So, product prototyping, understand your audience and pain points. Focus on one simple problem to start. It's so hard to solve even one problem really, really well. So I'd say like the more focus you have, the better. Like we were talking about earlier, narrow it down to like one or two user flows or one to two verticals maximum. And then really like focus on the design and the interactions that the user has between all of those steps, from the way things load to the clicks to the design of the headers and buttons of your brand, and make sure it like flows really well from one step to another. I personally really like designing things in Figma first, and then you can also like link together a bunch of UIs to create a prototype really easily. And you can learn the skill maybe in like 2 or 3 hours. And this will save you thousands of hours and loads of money too, because um, ultimately, like you can design a prototype in a few hours or even a couple days, whereas writing code and changing things in code to be able to like refactor things is a lot more time consuming. And if you're not an engineer yourself and you got to hire someone, like for example, your co-founder is not an engineer either, then you're going to spend a lot of money on engineering resources, where I think pretty much anyone can learn how to design in Figma. There's a ton of templates out there and UI kits that you can use to make a prototype look really nice. And if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've probably launched too late. I like that quote because sometimes it's easy to get caught up in perfection and wanting your product to be perfect before releasing it, but it doesn't need to be, because unless you get it in front of users that you really want to help, you may be building the wrong thing, for example, and then you waste a ton of time building the wrong stuff instead of building the stuff that your users actually care about. And then that, kind of brings us to MVP, or minimum viable product, which is defining your core value proposition by identifying the single most critical user problem to solve. Strip away all the nice to have features and focus on the essential functionality that validates your key hypothesis about user needs. And the ability to simplify means to eliminate the unnecessary so that the necessary may speak. I love apps that are super simple and that let me get to using it for the reason why I downloaded their app. When there's too much fluff in between the steps, I hate that, and it'll immediately lead me to uninstall your application. And then another key thing, is defining your key performance indicators, KPIs. When you launch, obviously you want to be able to measure impact and like how well things are going. If you don't have anything, defined, it's very difficult to understand that. So what should you measure or consider measuring? You should establish some specific metrics to measure your product market fit, and this is what you'll probably be talking to your investors about and other peers about. As time goes on, this is going to be like revenue or your sales, the cost of your goods sold, the number of users that you have, so like signups and users, your daily active users, weekly active users, and monthly active users. So these are users that have at least one session, which is like having your application open for like 10 seconds or longer. And then you can look at your retention rate, day zero, like how many users there should be like 100%. And then what's your day one? You might have users drop off or they don't have a session the next day. Day two, day three, up to day seven, I would say would be great to understand and focus on optimizing your D0 and your D1, because these are how many users are returning back to your application the next day. And that's a good predictor to make an assessment on how sticky and useful your application is for these users. And obviously, it'll need to be tailored to your exact app. If it doesn't make sense for your user to come back the next day, then that's fine too. And then your churn rate is like how many users are leaving and not coming back to your app, maybe after some period of time, like they've been inactive for like at least 30 days, or you can see an install that happened. That would be considered churn. And the ability, okay, sorry, this is a duplicate slide, my mistake there. From there, product data, be sure that you're able to, once you have these KPIs defined, be sure that you are able to measure the KPIs, with data. So, for example, you will need to be able to understand your KPIs, onboarding, conversion, and usage of your application, measure the improvement from iteration to iteration on funnels, revenue generation, and reducing costs. And then you can't manage what you don't measure. It's 100% true. You can't, like, if you, for example, release your product and you have a few different iterations and you can't see any impact on your KPIs, how do you know that iteration was a good thing or a bad thing? What if like you release a new feature and your DAU dropped by 50%? If you're not tracking it and you're not paying attention to it, or for example, new registrations drop by 50% compared to the weeks prior to that, then you don't know if your new iteration that you released is functioning as expected. That can indicate a bug, or you dramatically broke something about the user experience that makes people not want to engage with your product or activate with your product anymore. Yeah, and then from there, for your product launch and your go-to-market, you should have built, modest following by now by building in public. For example, from the moment you define your vision to beginning to work on a prototype and get feedback and make posts about it and share it, all the way through your MVP. So you should have some people understanding what you're doing and paying attention to what you're doing. So from there, once you're ready to launch and go to market, I would recommend taking a good amount of time to write, additional content about your vision, like blog posts and articles, record videos, talk about your mission, how to use your product, record a video of like step by step how to use your product, especially in the early days. It's not going to be perfect. So the more materials you can give someone, the more likely it is that they will convert. And then when you're ready, schedule all these posts, break down this content into smaller posts and share them across platforms. Yeah, we talked about writing blogs and sharing it. And then once you do, share it with your partners. For example, you're in a great network and cohort, ask them to share it too. It's totally normal. Share with your friends and ask them to post it or to repost your information, and then maintain the momentum once you do launch. Like, you're going to want to keep posting and keep sharing and keep providing insights and keep making iterations. It's important that you don't lose momentum early on. It's hard to, build and post about it at the same time and produce content. So maybe like designate roles for you and your co-founders, for example, on who's going to be doing what, so you can continue to keep folks engaged using your product and learning about your product and getting you that valuable feedback to make it the best it can be. And keep in mind that the value is in what gets used, not what gets built. From there, you just keep iterating. And I would definitely recommend factoring that into your roadmap and updating your roadmap as things change, because it will change. And as you iterate, success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. So not everything's going to be a hit. Not everything's going to result in a metric increase. Keep that in mind. And when it does, it'll feel great, but just keep in mind a lot of highs and a lot of lows. And that's perfectly okay. The key thing is consistency. Now let's talk about growth. Growth in terms of growing your product, I would say choose your social media platforms. Seek scale and impact above all else. If it doesn't get results, it doesn't matter. Um, for example, if you're like making a post on one platform and you're getting like zero feedback, zero engagement, then it's probably not worth you continuing to post or share things on anymore. Be ruthless. Your time is the most valuable thing that you have, and you're racing against time, in fact. So don't waste time on things that are not having the result that you need it to have. In terms of like Bitcoin topics in particular, seem to do well on like Sacra News, X, and Noster. And I know a lot of people don't like LinkedIn. It's fiat, but you should consider it for investors and partnerships on the B2B side of things, and then investors. It's not a super saturated platform for like our audience or our network and like kind of our space. So it's kind of nice to be able to make your post and then get higher visibility and more direct contact with maybe the people that you want to speak with, or the people that you would like to have a part of your board or invest in your company, or to be able to partner with your company to be able to integrate and to be able to have those conversations and have them be aware of you and your brand beforehand. So that's kind of one thing I would say about LinkedIn. It's probably not great for like B2C or business to consumer, but it could be good for the other channels that you need to focus on. So then that leaves us to community in terms of growth. One thing you'll want to do is create a Discord and or Telegram community for your product and your brand. When you make these connections with these individuals that are really passionate about what you're building, invite them to Discord, engage them, talk to them, get their feedback. Yeah, it's really great to be able to do that and to have a direct line to your audience and customers. So you can one like engage them, check in, see how things are going, see if they're still happy with the product in each release. These are kind of like your honest, your most loyal customers. So you really want to make sure that they're happy, because if they're not happy, it's likely that other people you're not engaging with or may not reach out to you or tell you something directly are also experiencing problems. So always get that research and that feedback. And Discord is a great way of facilitating that. Similar to that, events. So you can create your own event, or partner with someone who's hosting an event, or you guys can co-launch or co-do an event. They're great for raising brand awareness, forming partnership, gathering leads, and meeting investors. I will say this: if you want to host an event, they do generally require significant time and resources, so do them sparingly and intentionally with specific outcomes in mind, because it is very resource intensive. In terms of retention, customer retention refers to a company's ability to be able to keep its customers engaged over time and prevent them from switching to competitors. It's a critical metric, as acquiring new customers typically costs like 5 to 25x than retaining existing ones. With data, you should be able to continue to understand who uses your product and service and who stops. And one thing you can do that's really effective is like when customers do stop using your product, and this might be, further down the line. This doesn't need to be an MVP thing, but this could be, iteration type thing. It's not essential for the launch, I would say. But if you understand who's disengaging with your product, you can send them offers, especially if they're great customers. You want to reward your most loyal customers and your best customer with bonuses. And that's a principle that I stand by in terms of customer centricity. I don't really like, when companies will send like a new customer this really great offer, but let's say I've been a customer for 10 years and I've like done nothing but like shill their product and talk about how great it is, but then I don't get a good offer, and I'm providing much more value to that company. So I think about it from my own perspective and what I've also seen work really well. New incentives to get new customers way more expensive than rewarding and keeping your best customers happy. To me, it just makes sense, like from a principle standpoint, as well as like a marketing standpoint. Then think about, welcome tutorials, streaks, leaderboards, level systems, contests, and content. These are all ways that like I personally find like fun and intriguing when I'm using an app, and like that keeps me coming back to their app and enjoying using their application. Like thinking like Duolingo, for example. NPS like net promoter score, satisfaction scores. This is also nice to have in your application or send out periodically, maybe like once a quarter, for example, to understand how likely someone is to recommend your app and how satisfied they are, because that means they're also going to tell other people about it and whether or not they're going to lead to like uninstalling or not using your app. Obviously, we talked about this before. I'm a BI guy, business intelligence, so I like data. So measure your product usage from iteration to iteration, and data, data, data. Another area of getting traffic is search, organic. So you can basically make sure that your product is discoverable on the web if it's a web application. If even if it's not, if it's a mobile app, having a marketing website, or also the app store, so Google Play and the Apple Store, for example, the Apple App Store. Making sure that you have like really clear copy, making sure your people can understand your product and people can find your product. So I would recommend researching SEO, making sure you have meta tags, and that you have app store optimization if you're building a mobile app, because that will lead to a lot of good traffic for you over time. It's worth the investment. From there, referral program, kind of another like organic or kind of its own category, where if you have a referral program, you can give people like invite codes, and then you can share a link and you can see how many people are sharing your application with each other. And then be able to reward the users that are sharing the most amount of people, or even sharing one person a link to your application and having a sign up. Because one, it's like a lot more effective in terms of a channel, especially early on days of growth before maybe you have monetization implemented or have like a where people are willing to pay for your product at that stage. So you can offer incentives such as a revenue share or fixed cost per user invited, or maybe nothing at all if you have that kind of audience. It's a great growth hack, especially when closed beta. We talked about that earlier. So I would say referral programs are great after you've kind of got your MVP, you've solved a lot of your bugs. Create a referral program and definitely like encourage your audience and give them some incentives for doing so. This is where you can find some of your best customers and people that actually understand and want and use your app and then want other people to get value from it. Another great one that's like often overlooked because it's old is email. While email may be old and saturated, there's a reason why like every single company uses it. Every big company, every profitable company is using email. And that's because it's a direct line with your audience and it's incredibly valuable. So according to a litmus service among 2,000 marketers, net on average gives you $36 for every dollar spent. That's an average ROI of 3,500%. And look, guys, I implemented email marketing at ZBD. I built like out the email infrastructure and things like that. And it is very valuable. Users find value from it, and it does like kind of keep the funnels going and the loops going. Highly recommend it. Send out new releases, like send out newsletters, send out valuable user activity and usage and blogs, and get creative. Focus on transactional emails to start with because that's much easier to go to market with. And then expand to marketing because there's a bit more requirements required around marketing emails, but make sure your emails are valuable to the users and the users like to read them. Don't spam users, of course. Be strategic and be insightful about it. That will make your product differentiated. And this is really great ROI. It's really a fantastic thing. I hate email as it is very valuable to users and to companies. Another thing you can experiment with, I would say, is paid. So you can, or performance marketing. You can determine a budget that you can spend to acquire users from the likes of like Google, X, Facebook, and such. In my opinion, you want a monetization strategy implemented before pursuing this. And just as a warning, building a Bitcoin company, things are changing a bit today, but prior to today and in the past, I'll say, you may get shut down. That's happened before, and you'll just want to keep appealing and escalating. So yeah, just say that. And another really great growth channel, I would say like referral and then affiliate is like working with influencers, content creators, and companies that have a symbiotic or, kind of operating in the same industry as your brand to cross promote each other for like a fixed or tiered cost structure. So like paying them X dollar per user, Or if they hit like a certain scale, being able to apply a multiplier of like 1.25%. So give them like a 25% bonus. You'll of course want to screen all of the companies that want to work with you and ensure that they're aligned to your brand and they're not scammy. Because if they're affiliated with your brand, they're representing your brand to some extent, or to a pretty large extent, honestly. So you don't want to work with scammers and such, or people that have weak brands or weak principles, because then when they go out of business or they get in trouble for doing something scammy, it's going to reflect poorly on your brand. But you guys are in, top builder, so and you guys have a great network in Austin. Talk to people and see what you can work out. That's a really great growth hack after referral and monetization. So we talked about influencers already. I have a slide in here if you want to look specifically at that channel. The biggest one I would say right now is partners. Work with companies who are symbiotic with your brand to cross promote each other. When I launched Emerald's PlebLab was key to helping out during its launch and helping people understand and see the product. And like I said, help each other out. Go talk to each other, cross promote each other's companies. You guys have a great opportunity. You guys have a great network at Top Builder and in Austin as a whole. It's like Bitcoin Mecca, so definitely take advantage of that. Then this is kind of what it looks like. This is a little bit more, like a growth engine, a distribution engine. So thinking about distribution of content, like how you can imagine this model in your mind is you have some piece of content, like a post or release or activity, blogs or videos, and then you're going to take that content, you're going to distribute it across X, LinkedIn, Nostr, Discord, email, partners, influencers, across all these platforms. So from this one piece of content, you're getting so many use cases out of it and so much visibility, which then leads to users. And then if you have a referral program and an ability to share within your application, for example, other reasons to share content, that leads to more users or signing up for your application, wanting to engage with your application. This is how you create, really serious growth loops within your product in like a good way too. You're not like doing anything like scammy. You're providing value to people and they want to share that value with other people. They want to read about your product. And that's really one of the best ways you can build a great brand. And then monetization, need to knows, do worry about this early on. Gone are the days where you can just monetize later, figure out a business model later. That doesn't really happen anymore, especially if you want to get funding. And it's essential for positive return on ad spend, like we were talking about earlier, from paid sources. You can't spend $7 a user, right? And for example, like not recuperate any of that back. That's a really fast way to burn cash. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I would say based on funding, I would say correct. Like gone are the days where you can just say like, hey, I'm gonna make money later on this, and I'm gonna focus on growth. Like Uber is an example of that, right? Like a lot of Silicon Valley companies did that, where they were focused more on growth than they were on monetization and profitability. So yeah, exactly. Based on like very cheap money. I would say like monetizing early on and making sure, because the one of the best ways to measure if someone's actually extracting value from your application, you're building a business, is if they're willing to pay for what the service that you're providing. That's really like a huge signal on that you've built something great. Someone is actually willing to take out their wallet and spend their money on what you built. If you can get one person, 10 people, 100 people to do it, then there's no reason why you can't scale marketing and get 100,000 or 1 million people to do it. Obviously, it's not always that simple and straightforward, but it's possible, I would say. But if you can't get a single person to spend, you may want to reassess like how your product is functioning and what you're building, and consider like a pivot. It may take time, of course. Like don't do it because of 1 month, but like 2 years of building a product development, I think is like a good phase where you can be like, okay, I need to make sure my users are finding value and are going to be willing to pay. Because if they're not, then you don't have any other revenue sources, then there's no business to be built. Businesses make money, so that's kind of the key idea there. And then thinking about how do I make money? Like, what are some models that I can use to make money? The top ones that I want to highlight here are like software as a service or SaaS, which is charging a monthly or annual reoccurring cost. It's very good, very predictable revenue. It leads to MRR, monthly reoccurring revenue, or annually reoccurring revenue. This is very common for B2B businesses and some B2C businesses. You can do fees where you charge a flat or percentage based fee on every transaction. This is pretty difficult to grow and scale, and it requires generally enormous volume, I would say, to be able to like support a company. So it will take a significantly longer period of time to scale and to be able to break even. It's not to say it's not valuable revenue, especially if you're building something like a fintech, but just keep that in mind, like when you're building your models and what you're discussing with your investors. And then there's ads. This is the most common way for people to monetize on the internet, which is showing ads and offers to your users. When users complete them, you generate revenue and you can pay users rewards. You can have in-app purchases. I really like apps that do like single purchases. I think this is becoming a new trend where it's like a single purchase rather than SaaS necessarily for consumer apps in particular. This can also be for like content marketplaces similar to what I built on Emeralize, where it's just like you make a single purchase and it unlocks digital content and goods. This can be Epic Games, Fortnite, where you buy skins, or League of Legends, for example. And then sales, this is a price per product sold. For example, you can think e-commerce. And the biggest thing is like understand all the cost inputs to producing a good or service, and then add a markup, a percentage-based markup, this is referred to as margin. And you can have multiple monetization models. You don't necessarily have to have just one. So just keep that in consideration. A lot of the best or the most profitable companies, I shouldn't say the best, but a lot of the most profitable companies have multiple monetization methods. And then I included here some key terms. I don't want to go over this exhaustive list. I've thrown some of these terms around, right? And I'll send this deck out so then you can review it to understand some of the key terms associated with like unit economics in terms of revenue, costs, sales and marketing spend, return on ad spend, and then your gross profit. And then understanding these metrics too later on, and understanding what is most important for your business. And then when you do get to financial modeling, grow your users and revenue first prior to worrying about optimizing costs. Don't worry too much about fixed costs, or even if you're, losing money on each purchase. The goal is just to prove that you can make that conversion, then you can optimize your margin later. I wouldn't do that forever. There should be like some specific point in time and milestones that you should say where you're going to then start optimizing for these sort of metrics, or for gross profit rather. But don't worry too much about like your fixed costs in terms of like cloud provider or personnel's costs, because they'll get cheaper as you scale, the number of purchases or whatever business model that you have as you scale and grow. So, but you should worry about the cost of acquiring users or marketing your product. So, for example, if you're paying out more rewards than what you're making on a transaction, for example, to start, you should watch that very closely, because that's going to be tied to your burn. Could be great for growth and juicing growth, but keep that in mind. Like, you don't want to do that forever. There's going to need to be a stopping point, and you need to make sure like your product is sticky enough so when the promotion is over, those users will retain. And you should model about like 10 to 20% growth safely per month. You may model more, especially in the early days. You could probably 100% growth month on month for some time, but growth is not always linear. So I think like anywhere between like 10 to 25% growth rate is kind of nice to model when you're first starting, because you may have 100% growth one month and then a 50% decline the following month. Maybe your post gets shared by someone with a really big following, and the next month it doesn't, and the growth rate declines. So just kind of like getting it to fit on like a linear or log line would is probably solid. And then here I did include like a financial model. I don't want to go over the whole financial model today, but I kind of created like a template that you guys can kind of see like how all these numbers feed into each other. And then kind of analyze that. And if you do have questions, feel free to like follow up with me. I thought that would be helpful to share and provide everyone here. And then lastly, monetization strategy. So optimizing your product to maximize revenue and user lifetime value. So user lifetime value being how much revenue does this user generate you over the lifetime of their account or till they churn, where they're no longer using your app. You should optimize business decisions to reduce costs when you can. You should build scalable revenue that is predictable as possible. And you should focus on growing organically as much as you can until you perfect funnels and monetization, making sure you're getting the maximum dollar for every dollar you spend on sales and marketing spend to get those customers. And then get a really sticky or solid retention and monetize product before focusing on scaling user acquisition or paid user acquisition. And yeah, thank you. That was the whole presentation. I did include an appendix here of some books and things like that that really helped me grow. The product design one is a tutorial I did showing folks how to use like Bootstrap components in Figma to design a prototype, UIs, etc. And then some of these other books were just really helpful in like my own startup journey at CBD and like building out Emeralize and getting its initial user base and making sure like I was building good features that people wanted. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Let me know if you have any questions. More than happy to answer them.